By the time Kola finally married her, Zainab had already learned how to live without expecting anything from him. That was the part nobody warned her about. They congratulated her. They sprayed money. They said, "At last." But no one noticed that she had stopped asking questions years before he bought the ring. The first promise was made on a bench that had chipped paint and a loose nail sticking out at the edge. Zainab remembered that bench clearly, not because it was special, but because it was ordinary. The kind of place you sat when you believed life would naturally move forward, without force, without begging. They were final year students then. The air around campus felt restless, thick with anxiety and expectation. Everyone was talking about NYSC, about postings, about whether Nigeria would be kind or cruel to them next. Kola sat beside her, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on nothing in particular. "I don't want to rush marriage," he said. "I've seen how rushing into marriage ruins people." Zainab nodded slowly. She liked the way he said things calmly, like someone who had already thought them through. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't charming in a loud way. He felt safe. "But I'm not playing about us and what we share," he added. "After NYSC, we will settle down." He said it like it was a simple sequence. School, then NYSC, then marriage. It sounded clean, logical, and responsible. She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. She didn't ask what settle down meant. She didn't ask if he meant engagement, introduction, or wedding. She didn't want to sound like she was rushing him ahead of himself. In her mind, love didn't need interrogation. They dated quietly. No long captions on social media. No public displays of affection that attracted attention. Their love existed in shared snacks, late-night calls, borrowed textbooks, and inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. When her friends complained about men who promised the future but behaved like the present was all that mattered, Zainab felt lucky. Kola is different, she told herself. He planned. He thought ahead. He talked about stability like something sacred. NYSC came and scattered them. Zainab was posted to a small town in Osun State, the kind of place where mornings were slow and evenings were loud with insects. Kola went to Ogun State, closer to Lagos, closer to opportunity, closer to movement. The first month felt manageable. They called often, texted constantly, shared pictures of camp food, and complained about parade drills. When she felt lonely, she reminded herself it was temporary. "It's just 1 year," Kola said. "Then everything starts." That sentence became her anchor. The loneliness didn't arrive all at once. It crept in. It arrived the first night she came back from work, removed her shoes, and realized there was no one to talk to. It arrived when she dressed up nicely and had nowhere to go. It arrived when she scrolled through Instagram and saw engagement photos from people she used to borrow pens from in class. One evening, she watched her roommate scream into her phone and jump around the room. "He proposed," the girl shouted, eyes wet with joy. Zainab clapped, hugged her, and smiled. Later that night, she lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why happiness for others sometimes felt like an accusation. She called Kola. After NYSC, she said casually, trying to sound playful, "You still remember, right?" He laughed. "Why are you asking like this?" "No reason," she muttered. "You know I remember. But as a man, I need to settle down first. You understand that, right?" She said yes before he finished the sentence. She always did. Her mother asked the first serious question during one of her visits home. "So this your boyfriend?" Her mother said, stirring soup slowly. "When is he coming to see us?" Zainab hesitated. Just a second too long. "After NYSC," she said. Her mother looked at her, not unkindly, just observant. That sound stayed with Zainab long after the visit ended. NYSC ended. People moved on. Some went straight into jobs. Some into marriages. Some relocated abroad. Life did not pause to wait for Kola to feel ready. The first excuse came gently. "I need a job first." Zainab agreed immediately. It made sense. Marriage needed money, stability, and planning. When he complained about transport costs or delayed salaries, she sent money to him whenever she could. "Don't worry, I'll pay you back," he said. She told him not to bother. Love wasn't transactional. Months passed, then a year. The questions became louder. From friends, from family, from church aunties who smiled too hard. "So what's happening with you and Kola? When are we wearing asoabi?" She laughed it off publicly and cried privately. Whenever she brought it up, Kola grew defensive. "You are pressuring me. Marriage is not something you rush into. Do you want us to suffer?" She apologized for asking. Each apology shaved something off her. What she didn't notice at first was how she was changing. She stopped planning far ahead. She stopped imagining wedding colors. She stopped talking about the future unless he mentioned it first. She learned how to love quietly, how to wait without asking, how to make herself smaller so she wouldn't look demanding. By the time he finally said, 2.5 years after NYSC, "I think we should start planning our wedding," she didn't scream. She didn't jump. She didn't even cry immediately. She just felt tired. That night, alone in the bathroom, she cried softly, not from joy, but from relief. At least the waiting had an end. Or so she thought. The engagement did not feel like a celebration. It felt like a ceasefire. People congratulated Zainab with excitement she struggled to mirror. Her phone buzzed constantly, with messages, calls, and voice notes filled with joy. "At last, God has done it. You see, your patience has paid off at last." She smiled, thanked them, and let the words pass through her. Inside, something stayed quiet. Kola didn't buy a ring immediately. He said they would do it properly when plans became clearer. Zainab told herself it didn't matter. A ring was just a symbol. What mattered was his intention to marry her. That was what she had been telling herself for years anyway. The first few months of engagement looked like progress on the surface. They talked about wedding venues, about guest lists, about how expensive weddings had become. Every conversation ended with a sigh and the same conclusion. "Let's not rush things." Zainab nodded. She had become very good at nodding. She noticed the shift in herself during a church service. The pastor was talking about marriage, about choosing wisely, about joy, about companionship. Couples were holding hands. Single women were praying quietly. Zainab sat still, staring straight ahead. She wasn't excited. She wasn't afraid. She felt neutral. That scared her more than anxiety would have. Kola grew more relaxed after the engagement. Not more romantic. Not more intentional. Just more comfortable. He assumed she was locked in now. His calls reduced. Their dates became less frequent. Conversations revolved around stress, money, traffic, and work frustration. When she tried to talk about her feelings, he sighed. "You think too much," he said. "Everything is not a big discussion. We are already engaged. What are you worried about?" She stopped talking. The waiting took on a different shape. Before, she had been waiting for marriage. Now, she was waiting for effort. She waited for him to ask how her day went without being prompted. She waited for him to plan something special. She waited for reassurance that she hadn't waited in vain. She didn't want to beg for romance. That felt humiliating. So she stayed quiet. One evening, while folding clothes, she realized she had stopped imagining life with him vividly. She could picture a house, a routine, some responsibilities, but not joy. That thought unsettled her. She tried to remember when she last laughed freely with him, when conversation flowed without effort, when love felt light. The memory felt distant, like a story she used to know well, but couldn't retell clearly anymore. Pressure crept in from outside. Her mother called more frequently. "So when are we fixing a date?" "People are asking." "You are not getting younger." Zainab responded carefully, as if the future were fragile. "Soon, mummy. We are still planning." She did not mention that planning had no timeline. Her friends began to split into categories. Those who were married, those who were engaged, those who had moved on. Zainab stayed suspended in between. At gatherings, people spoke to her with a mix of admiration and pity. "You are a strong woman, oh. God will reward your patience." She wondered why love needed endurance training. The arguments started quietly, with small things. Her asking him why he hadn't called. Him accusing her of constant nagging. Her asking him when they would set a wedding date. Him saying she was adding pressure to his life. You know I'm not where I want to be financially, he snapped one evening. I know. I'm just asking for clarity, she said with frustration. Why can't you just trust me? Trust? That word always ended the conversation. One night, after a particularly tense phone call, Zainab lay awake thinking about the version of herself that first believed after NYSC was a solid promise. That girl had been hopeful, soft, and certain. This version of her was careful, measured, and afraid of asking for too much. She wondered, quietly, guiltily, whether love was supposed to feel like this. The wedding date was finally fixed not because everything was ready, but because everything was tiring. Family pressure intensified. Questions became sharper. Silence became suspicious. Kola announced the date one evening over the phone. Let's just do it this year, he said. I'm not getting younger. Zainab thanked him. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not feel the rush she had imagined years ago. Instead, she felt something settle, like a decision that had already been made long before the ring arrived. As preparations began, Zainab noticed something else. She was no longer dreaming forward. She was managing expectations. She chose simplicity over excitement, practicality over joy. She told herself that marriage wasn't about feelings anyway, that love matured into responsibility, that this was normal. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered if maturity was just the name people gave to disappointment when it stayed too long. By the time the wedding approached, Zainab had already done something she didn't know how to undo. She had trained her heart not to expect anything from Kola, and that, she would later learn, does not disappear just because vows are exchanged. The wedding came faster than Zainab expected and slower than she wanted. Once the date was fixed, life shifted into planning mode. With meetings, calls, guest lists, bridal colors, and budgets, everything moved with urgency now, as if all the years of delay had been forgiven simply because a date existed. People treated her differently. They called her Mrs. To Be with smiles that felt heavy. They asked about fabrics, venues, makeup artists. They praised her endurance openly now, as if waiting had been her assignment all along. You see why patience is good? Someone said during a family gathering. Zainab smiled politely. She did not trust herself to respond. Kola was present, but not deeply involved. He attended meetings when necessary, contributed money when asked, gave opinions when pressed. But the excitement people expected from a groom was absent. When she pointed this out gently, he shrugged. Isn't the important thing that we are doing the wedding? He asked. Why are you looking for drama? She dropped the conversation. She had learned by now that wanting emotional participation was often interpreted as troublemaking. The wedding morning arrived quietly. Zainab woke up before her alarm, her heart calm in a way that surprised her. No nerves, no butterflies, just awareness. This is happening. As the makeup artist worked on her face, people moved around her, talking loudly, laughing, taking pictures. She watched herself in the mirror, carefully drawn brows, soft lips, eyes lined with precision. She looked beautiful. That was the problem. Beauty makes people assume joy. When Kola walked into the room briefly to check on her, he smiled. You look good, he said. She waited for more. He kissed her cheek lightly and stepped back. Everything will be fine. The ceremony was perfect by all visible standards. The music swelled. Guests stood. Vows were exchanged. Applause filled the air. Zainab smiled on cue. She laughed when expected. She held his hand when instructed. As money rained on them, people shouted blessings. Love forever. Happy home. Finally, Zainab absorbed the words like noise. She noticed small things instead. How his grip on her hand loosened quickly. How he seemed relieved once formalities were over. How she felt like she was performing something she had rehearsed alone for years. The first night in their home was quiet. Not awkward. Not tense. Just flat. They were tired. Exhausted. He fell asleep quickly. She lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. This was it. No dramatic realization. No panic. Just acceptance. Marriage did not change Kola. That was the truth she avoided saying out loud. He did not become more attentive. He did not become more expressive. He did not become more emotionally available. What changed was Zainab. She adjusted faster than she wanted to admit. She stopped expecting conversation after long days. She stopped bringing up issues that led nowhere. She stopped imagining a version of him that didn't exist. She filled the silence with routine. Some mornings, she watched him dress for work and wondered when exactly love had turned into coexistence. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't unfaithful. He wasn't violent, which made her confusion harder to explain. How do you complain about a man who is simply absent in the ways that matter? One evening, while eating dinner quietly, she asked, "Do you think we rushed into marriage?" Kola paused, spoon midair. "What kind of question is that?" "I'm just asking." "We waited for years," he said sharply. "How is that rushing?" She nodded. She had learned when to retreat. The loneliness returned, but this time, it lived inside the same house. She missed the version of herself that believed marriage would finally bring closeness. She missed anticipation. She missed feeling wanted. Sometimes, when he touched her absent-mindedly, she felt like she was being reminded of an obligation, not invited into affection. She didn't say this to anyone. Married women were expected to be grateful. Her mother visited one afternoon and looked around the house approvingly. "Marriage is not romance," she said casually. "It is endurance." Zainab smiled faintly. She wondered when endurance became the standard for love. At night, when the house was quiet, Zainab thought about the years she waited, about the patience she offered freely, about how waiting had trained her heart to accept less without protest. Marriage had arrived, but it had arrived to meet a woman who no longer knew how to ask for more. And that, she suspected, was the consequence no vow could undo. Marriage did not break Zainab. It reshaped her. The change was subtle enough that no one noticed. Not Kola, not her family, not even her closest friends. It looked like maturity from the outside. Calmness, restraint, composure. Inside, it was something else. She learned his rhythms quickly. Kola liked quiet mornings, simple meals, predictable routines. He preferred conversations that stayed on the surface: work stress, traffic, bills, the news. Anything deeper made him uncomfortable. At first, she tried to pull him closer. "How was work, really? Are you okay? Do you ever feel like we're drifting?" He answered politely, briefly. Then he changed the subject. After a while, she stopped asking. The house became efficient. She woke early, prepared meals, managed schedules, paid attention to details. She became very good at being a wife. Too good. She noticed one evening that she no longer waited for him to come home before eating. Not out of anger, out of habit. Another night, she realized she no longer told him certain things not because he forbade it, but because she already knew how he would respond. It will be fine. You worry too much." She saved herself the effort. Sometimes, while washing plates or folding clothes, she wondered what would have happened if she had asked harder questions earlier. If she had demanded clarity after NYSC. If she had refused to shrink her needs. If she had walked away when waiting started to feel like erasure. The thoughts didn't come with regret exactly. They came with curiosity and sadness. Kola assumed everything was fine. To him, marriage had solved the problem. The questions had stopped. The pressure was gone. The structure was in place. He did not see the silence for what it was. When she laughed less, he assumed adulthood had caught up with her. When she spoke carefully, he assumed she was being respectful. When she stopped initiating affection, he assumed comfort. He never asked what it cost her. One afternoon, she ran into an old friend at the supermarket. "You've changed," the woman said after they hugged. "You're calmer." Zainab smiled. Marriage. The word tasted strange in her mouth. That night, she stood in the bathroom staring at her reflection. She looked fine, healthy, put together, but she couldn't remember the last time she felt excited about anything. Not work, not love, not the future. The resentment arrived quietly, not as anger, as grief. She grieved the years she defended him, the apologies she made for wanting normal things, the way she had turned patience into a personality trait. She realized, slowly, that waiting had taught her how to accept absence without complaint. And now, absence was what she lived with daily. There was no single moment of realization, just accumulation. 1,000 small disappointments stacked neatly on top of each other until they formed a life. She noticed it one evening when Kola told her he would be working late. "Okay," she said automatically. He paused. "That's it." "Yes." No protest. No disappointment. No longing. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe, but it passed quickly. Sometimes, lying beside him at night, she wondered if he loved her, or if he loved the version of her that asked for nothing. The thought scared her, because she didn't know how to be anyone else anymore. She tried once, carefully, to open a conversation. "Do you think waiting too long can change how people love?" she asked softly. Kola frowned. "Why are you asking this kind of question?" "I'm just thinking." "You think too much," he said again. "Life is already hard. Don't complicate it." She nodded. She had heard that sentence for years. Zainab began to understand the real consequence of waiting. It wasn't that she almost lost him. It was that she lost parts of herself while trying to keep him. Marriage had not healed that. Marriage had sealed it. One night, alone in the living room, she sat in silence long after the TV had gone off. The house was still. The fan hummed softly. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who believed love would reward patience. That girl would not recognize this woman, and that realization hurt more than anything else. The first time Zainab admitted the truth to herself, it felt like betrayal. Not of Kola, of the girl she used to be. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. No argument. No tears. No trigger. She was washing plates, hands moving automatically, when the thought arrived fully formed and uninvited. If I had met him today, I would not choose him. The plate slipped slightly in her hand. She steadied it, heart beating faster than the moment deserved. She stood there for a long time, water running, sponge idle, staring at nothing. The thought didn't come with anger. It came with clarity. Marriage had given her legitimacy. People stopped asking questions. Her mother relaxed. Church aunties smiled approvingly. "You're settled now," they said. Zainab learned that settled didn't mean fulfilled. It meant accounted for. Kola remained consistent. He went to work, came home, paid bills, did what was required. He was not cruel. He was not unfaithful. He was not dramatic. And that was exactly why her unhappiness felt illegitimate. What right did she have to feel empty when nothing was technically wrong? So she stayed quiet. The truth was simple and painful. Waiting had trained her for this life. Years of postponement had taught her how to lower expectations without noticing, how to call emotional absence understanding, how to interpret silence as peace. By the time marriage arrived, she no longer knew how to want loudly. Sometimes Kola noticed the distance. "You don't talk like before," he said one night. She shrugged. "People change." He nodded, satisfied with the answer. He did not ask which version of her he had married. One evening, while visiting her mother, they sat together peeling vegetables. Her mother glanced at her carefully. "Marriage is not easy," she said. "But you look strong." Zainab smiled faintly. Strength had become her disguise. She wanted to ask her mother a question she already knew the answer to. What happens when endurance becomes your whole personality? She didn't ask. There were moments, small, sharp moments, when grief surfaced. Watching couples laugh freely. Hearing friends talk about being desired. Remembering how she once imagined love would feel. In those moments, she didn't wish she had left him. She wished she had chosen herself earlier. Kola proposed marriage because time pressured him. She accepted because time had trained her. They met in the middle of obligation. No one lied. No one cheated. No one escaped. Years later, someone would ask her how long they dated before marriage. She would smile politely and say, "A long time." She never said what the time had taken from her. At night, lying beside her husband, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, Zainab sometimes whispered apologies to herself for waiting when she should have walked away, for mistaking patience for love, for believing that endurance would be rewarded. Marriage had come. But it had come too late to meet the woman who needed it most. And so she stayed. Not because she was trapped, but because leaving wouldn't return what she lost. This was the life she weighted herself into. Quiet, stable, respectable, and permanently missing something she could no longer name.